The morning air crackled with electricity as Vivian Hayes hurried down Fifth Avenue, her worn messenger bag bouncing against her hip. She was already 15 minutes late for her barista shift, and Mrs. Gonzalez had warned her that one more tardy would mean termination. With student loans piling up and rent due in 3 days, losing this job wasn't an option. Come on, she muttered, dodging tourists who seemed determined to walk as slowly as humanly possible. The light at the intersection turned red just as she reached it. Damn it, Vivian checked her watch. 17 minutes late now. Ignoring the flashing "Don't Walk" sign, she darted into the street. The screeching of tires was her only warning before her body collided with cold metal. Her coffee cup exploded against the hood of a midnight black Bentley, sending hot liquid cascading across the immaculate finish. Are you completely blind or just spectacularly stupid? A sharp British voice cut through her daze as she regained her balance. Vivian looked up to see an impeccably dressed man emerging from the Bentley's back seat. Everything about him screamed money, from his tailored Armani suit to his hand-stitched Oxford shoes. His face might have been handsome if it weren't contorted with rage. You just ruined a $250,000 paint job, he snarled, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. Do you have any idea who I am? The small crowd that had gathered began whispering. Vivian caught fragments. Maxwell Blackwood, and richest man in Manhattan. I don't care if you're the King of England, Vivian retorted, trying to salvage what was left of her pride. You nearly hit me. Maxwell's eyes narrowed dangerously. Actually, you ran in front of my car against the light like some deranged squirrel. He pulled out his phone. What's your name? My lawyers will be in touch about damages. Vivian laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Damages? I'm working 3 jobs to make rent, and you want to sue me over car polish? Go ahead. You can't get blood from a stone. Something in Maxwell's expression shifted. Surprised, perhaps, that someone would speak to him this way, he studied her more carefully, taking in her mismatched thrift store clothes and defiant green eyes. 3 jobs, you say? His tone shifted to something more calculating, yet still so carelessly late that you'd risk your life to save a few minutes? Some of us have actual problems, Vivian shot back, already backing away. Not all of us can throw money at every inconvenience. A ghost of a smile played at Maxwell's lips. Oh, but money solves most problems rather efficiently. He snapped his fingers and his driver appeared with a business card. Maxwell Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Enterprises. Perhaps we can find a more creative solution to your situation. I don't need your charity, Vivian said, but took the card reflexively. Charity? Hardly. Maxwell's eyes glinted like polished steel. I have a proposition that might solve both our problems. Come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. He returned to his car, then paused. And Ms. Hayes. Vivian Hayes. Ms. Hayes, do try not to be late this time. I abhor tardiness. As the Bentley pulled away, Vivian glanced at the elegant card in her hand, then at her watch. 23 minutes late now. Her job was almost certainly gone. What kind of proposition could a billionaire have for someone like her? And why? Did the look in his eyes make her pulse quicken with both warning and something she wasn't ready to name? Vivian slipped the card into her pocket. She'd probably throw it away. Probably. But somehow she knew she wouldn't. The Blackwood Enterprises headquarters pierced the Manhattan skyline like a gleaming silver dagger. Vivian stood at its base, neck craned upward, clutching a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. Her reflection in the mirrored glass looked small and out of place. This is insane, she muttered to herself. After losing her barista job yesterday, as predicted, curiosity had gotten the better of her. That and desperation. The security guard eyed her suspiciously as she approached the desk. I have an appointment with Maxwell Blackwood, she said, amazed at how steady her voice sounded. Name? The guard didn't bother looking up from his computer. Vivian Hayes. His fingers paused on the keyboard. ID, please. After verifying her identity, he handed her a visitor's badge. Express elevator, top floor. The elevator ascended with stomach-lurching speed. Vivian used the 60-second ride to rehearse what she'd say. She wasn't interested in whatever bizarre offer he had planned, but if he felt guilty about nearly running her over, a simple check to cover her lost wages would suffice. The elevator, doors opened to reveal a stark minimalist reception area with panoramic views of the city. A sleek blonde woman approached. "Ms. Hayes, Mr. Blackwood is expecting you. I'm Jessica, his executive assistant." Jessica led her through a labyrinth of white corridors to a set of imposing black doors. "He appreciates punctuality," she whispered, checking her watch with a nod of approval. 8:57, good. Maxwell Blackwood stood with his back to the door, gazing out at his kingdom below. He turned when Vivian entered, his cool gray eyes appraising her as if she were a commodity on the trading floor. "Ms. Hayes, you came." He gestured to a chair. "Coffee?" "I've had enough, thanks," Vivian said, remaining standing. "What's this about, Mr. Blackwood?" "Please, call me Max." He smiled, a practiced expression that didn't reach his eyes. "No. One calls me Maxwell except my mother and the board of directors when they're displeased." "Fine, Max, what do you want?" He circled his desk, leaning against it casually. "Direct, I like that. So many people waste my time with pleasantries when we both know it's all about the deal." "I'm not here to make a deal," Vivian said. "I just want to know why you invited me here." "I have a problem, Ms. Hayes, and I think you might be the solution." He picked up a tablet, swiping through what appeared to be photographs. "My grandmother's 90th birthday is approaching. The family matriarch, controller of 30% of Blackwood shares, and the only person whose opinion actually matters to me." He turned the tablet to show her an elegant elderly woman with Maxwell's same steel gray eyes. "She's been concerned about my public image. The tabloids call me Manhattan's most heartless bachelor. Not entirely undeserved." He shrugged. "Grandmother has decided I need to show a softer side before she'll sign off on my newest acquisition." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "What does this have to do with me?" "I need someone real. Someone authentic who isn't impressed by my wealth or intimidated by my position." He stepped closer. "Someone who would throw coffee on my car and tell me off in the middle of Fifth Avenue." Understanding dawned on Vivian's face. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? That's your proposition? For 6 weeks. Accompany me to family events, charity galas, be seen in public. Show my grandmother that I'm capable of maintaining a relationship with someone who isn't a supermodel or socialite." "Absolutely not." Vivian headed for the door. "I'd rather work at a fast food restaurant than be your rent-a-girlfriend. I'll pay off your student loans, all of them." Vivian froze, her hand on the doorknob. "What did you say?" "Your student loans, plus rent for a year, and I'll write you a recommendation for any graduate program you wish to apply for." She turned back slowly. "How do you know about my student loans?" Maxwell waved dismissively. "Basic background check. Standard procedure." "That's invasive and creepy." "That's business. But I'm offering a solution to your most pressing problem." He approached her, stopping just close enough to be inappropriate. "Think of it as a business arrangement. 6 weeks of your time in exchange for financial freedom." Vivian's mind raced. Her loans totaled nearly $87,000. Working 3 jobs, it would take her decades to pay them off. What exactly would this entail? Public appearances, dinner with my family, learning enough about each other to be convincing. Nothing physical, beyond basic displays of affection for appearance's sake. And after 6 weeks, we have a public amicable breakup. You're free to go with your debts cleared and a glowing reference. Vivian studied him. Why me? You could hire an actress. Grandmother would spot a professional a mile away. She has an uncanny ability to detect dishonesty. He allowed himself a genuine half-smile. But you, Vivian Hayes, are refreshingly, almost brutally honest. It's what caught my attention yesterday. So you're hiring me because I was rude to you? I'm hiring you because you weren't afraid of me. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Vivian took a deep breath. I need time to think about this. Of course. He returned to his desk. You have until 5 p.m. today. After that, I'll need to explore other options. As she turned to leave, he added, Oh, and Vivian, if you accept, be prepared to move into my penthouse. A convincing relationship requires convincing logistics. The elevator descended as rapidly as it had risen, but Vivian hardly noticed. Her mind was too busy calculating exactly how much her integrity was worth and whether she could afford to say no. This isn't a penthouse, it's a small country, Vivian murmured as Maxwell's private elevator opened directly into his apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of Manhattan, making the city appear like a toy model. Far below. It's functional, Maxwell replied with casual indifference, shrugging off his suit jacket and handing it to a waiting staff member who seemed to materialize from nowhere. Vivian had called him at 4:58 p.m. with her decision, 2 minutes before his deadline. She had tried to convince herself it was a calculated pause to establish boundaries. In reality, she'd spent the day frantically weighing her options, eventually concluding that no moral high ground was worth $87,000 in student debt. Your quarters are in the East Wing, Maxwell continued, leading her through a living room larger than her entire apartment. I've had Jessica arrange for a suitable wardrobe. I have clothes, Vivian protested. Maxwell's glance spoke volumes. Not for the events we'll be attending. The first is tomorrow night, a charity gala for the Metropolitan Museum. Several board members will be there, including my grandmother. Tomorrow? Vivian stopped abruptly. That's not enough time to prepare. I don't know anything about you, your family, how we supposedly met. Which is why we're having dinner in 30 minutes to establish our backstory. He checked his watch. I've cleared my evening to brief you on the necessary details. How generous of you, Vivian muttered. Maxwell's lips twitched. Sarcasm is fine in private, but in public, try to look at me as if I'm slightly more appealing than a tax audit. I'll do my best, she replied with an exaggerated flutter of eyelashes. He led her to a guest suite that was bigger than her entire apartment. A king-sized bed dominated one wall, while a sitting area with its own fireplace occupied another corner. The bathroom featured a shower with multiple heads and a tub that could accommodate a small swimming competition. This will do, I suppose, Vivian said, attempting to maintain her composure. There's a dossier on the desk with information about me, my family, and our fictional relationship. Review it before dinner. He turned to leave, then paused. The contract is there too. My lawyers prepared it this morning. Standard non-disclosure agreement, terms of payment, duration of our arrangement. You're very efficient. I didn't build Blackwood Enterprises by wasting time. His expression softened fractionally. There's also information about my grandmother, Eleanor Blackwood. She's important to me. For the first time, Vivian glimpsed something beyond the cool, calculated businessman. You really care about her opinion. She raised me after my parents died, he said, the admission seeming to surprise even him. Car accident. I was 8. Vivian's sarcastic retort died on her lips. I'm sorry. Maxwell straightened, mask firmly back in place. Dinner at 7. Wear something from the closet. After he left, Vivian explored her quarters. The walk-in closet was filled with designer clothes in exactly her size, price tags conspicuously, removed but likely totaling more than her yearly income. The dossier on the desk was meticulous, 30 pages detailing Maxwell's biography, business achievements, family connections, and preferences. The fictional story of their meeting was simple but plausible. They'd met at a charity event where Vivian was working, not as a server but as an event coordinator's assistant. He'd been impressed by her efficiency and asked her to coffee. The relationship had progressed naturally over 2 months. Learn this like it's the most important final exam of your life, she told herself, settling in to memorize the details. At dinner, seated at opposite ends of a table that could accommodate 20, Maxwell quizzed her relentlessly. Favorite food? Rare steak, roasted vegetables, You dislike seafood and have an unexpected weakness for apple pie, Vivian answered. Allergies? None for you. I'm allergic to shellfish. That part's actually true. Family? Parents deceased? Raised by Eleanor, who splits her time between the Manhattan townhouse and the Hamptons estate. One younger sister, Charlotte, who runs the Blackwood Foundation. First date? Little Italian place in the village called Marcello's. You ordered the special without looking at the menu, and I was impressed when you spoke to the owner in fluent Italian. Maxwell nodded, appearing satisfied. You're a quick study. I've always had a good memory, useful when you're working multiple jobs and taking night classes. Something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps. What were you studying? Environmental law. I want to specialize in corporate accountability. He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. So you aspire to sue people like me? People exactly like you, she confirmed with a small smile. Well, at least our conversations will be interesting. He raised his wine glass. To convincing deceptions. As they clinked glasses, Vivian noticed a flash of vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. For just a moment, Maxwell Blackwood looked like a man who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten there was a world outside them. Why does your grandmother think you need a relationship? Vivian asked suddenly. What does proving you can date someone like me have to do with business acquisitions? Maxwell set down his glass carefully. Blackwood started as a family company. My grandfather built it from nothing, but it was Eleanor who transformed it into what it is today. She believes business is about relationships, not just transactions. That empathy is as important as strategy. And she doesn't think you have empathy? His expression hardened. I have a different approach. Efficiency over sentiment. Results over relationships. That explains the Manhattan's Most Heartless Bachelor title. The tabloids exaggerate. I'm not heartless, just focused. Vivian studied him, this man who approached romance like a business merger. Has there ever been anyone real, someone you actually cared about? For a moment, Maxwell looked genuinely startled by the question. Then his expression closed off again. We should review tomorrow's event, he said, changing the subject. The guest list includes several key investors. As he spoke about business strategies and networking opportunities, Vivian wondered what it would take to crack the polished exterior of Maxwell Blackwood, and whether she actually wanted to see what lay beneath. The Metropolitan Museum of Art glowed like a jewel box against the night sky. A red carpet stretched from the street to the grand entrance, lined with photographers and reporters eagerly documenting the arrival of New York's elite. Vivian peered through the tinted window of Maxwell's limousine, her stomach tightening with anxiety. Remember, Maxwell said, adjusting his bow tie, you belong here just as much as anyone else. That's a lovely sentiment, Vivian replied, smoothing the silk of her emerald gown, a Valentino creation that had arrived that morning with a handwritten note from Jessica. But we both know it's not true. Maxwell studied her with unexpected intensity. Actually, it is. This world of privilege and excess? It's largely performance. Half the people here are desperately trying to convince the other half that they belong. A hint of a smile touched his lips. The difference is, you and I know we're acting. Before she could respond, the car door opened. Maxwell stepped out first, then extended his hand. The moment Vivian emerged, camera flashes exploded around them. Mr. Blackwood, over here. Maxwell, who's your date? Look this way, please. Maxwell's arm slid around her waist, his touch firm but not possessive. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. Smile like I've just whispered something charming, he murmured. Tilt your head slightly toward mine. Vivian complied, hyper-aware of his proximity. For someone so emotionally distant, Maxwell Blackwood was surprisingly good at physical intimacy, at least the performed kind. Excellent, he approved as they moved forward. Now laugh softly, as if remembering something delightful from earlier. Do you always choreograph your dates this precisely? She asked through her smile. Only the important ones. As they reached the reporters, Maxwell transformed. His usual clipped efficiency gave way to a charismatic ease that Vivian hadn't witnessed before. "Maxwell, who's the mystery woman?" called a reporter from the New York Post. "This is Vivian Hayes," he replied, his British accent somehow more pronounced in public. "We've been seeing each other for a few months now." "Vivian, how did you meet New York's most notorious bachelor?" Maxwell tensed slightly beside her, but Vivian was ready. She'd rehearsed this. "I was coordinating a charity event," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Max kept changing the seating arrangements, driving everyone crazy. She glanced up at him with manufactured affection. "I finally told him if he moved one more place card, I'd seat him in the kitchen with the dishwashers." Maxwell's laugh seemed genuinely surprised. "She's the only person who's ever threatened me and gotten a dinner invitation instead of a severance package." The reporters ate it up, scribbling notes as Maxwell guided her inside. "That was perfect," he said once they were beyond earshot. "The right mix of authenticity and charm. My grandmother will hear about that exchange before we even reach her table." The museum's great hall had been transformed into a fantasy of white orchids and silver candelabras. New York's wealthiest and most influential circulated beneath the soaring ceilings, their jewels catching the light like constellations. "There she is," Maxwell said, nodding toward a striking white-haired woman holding court near a Greek statue. "Eleanor Blackwood, remember? She likes Earl Grey tea with a slice of lemon, not milk. Collects first editions of British mysteries. Graduated top of her class from Wellesley in 1956, when women were still expected to pursue Mrs. degrees instead of BAs. Served on 12 corporate boards before retiring to focus on the family business. Believes philanthropy should be about systemic change, not vanity projects." Vivian took a deep breath. "And she can spot insincerity from a mile away, so I should be myself. Just the version of myself who's fallen for her grandson." Maxwell's eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm impressed. I told you I have a good memory. It's not just memory. You understand what matters to her." Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. "That's rare." As they approached Eleanor Blackwood, Vivian felt Maxwell straighten beside her, like a soldier coming to attention. The subtle change spoke volumes about their relationship. "Grandmother," Maxwell said, bending to kiss her cheek. "You look wonderful." "Save the flattery for your board members, Maxwell," Eleanor replied, though her eyes twinkled. Her accent was pure Upper East Side aristocracy, each word precisely enunciated. "And introduce me to this young woman who's apparently convinced you to emerge from that glass tower of yours. Vivian Hayes. This is my grandmother, Eleanor Blackwood." "Grandmother." "This is Vivian." Eleanor's handshake was firm, her assessment shrewd. "So you're the one who's been occupying my grandson's time. I was beginning to think he'd invented you." "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Blackwood," Vivian said. "Your work with educational initiatives for young women is inspiring." Eleanor's eyebrows rose. "You're familiar with my foundation work?" "I benefited from a similar scholarship program for first-generation college students. Without it, I wouldn't have been able to pursue environmental law." "Environmental law?" Eleanor looked delighted. "How fascinating. Maxwell, you didn't mention your Vivian was an attorney." "Still in training," Vivian corrected. "One more semester to go." "In my experience, the most valuable perspectives often come from those still asking questions rather than those convinced they have all the answers." Eleanor gave her grandson a pointed look. "Wouldn't you agree, Maxwell?" "I've found Vivian's question enlightening," he replied diplomatically. Eleanor laughed, a rich, full sound. "I'll bet you have. Maxwell surrounds himself with people who nod and say yes. It must be refreshing for him to hear a different word occasionally." "Grandmother," Maxwell began, but Eleanor waved him off. "Go fetch us some champagne, darling. I want to speak with Vivian privately." After he reluctantly departed, Eleanor's expression sharpened. "Now, tell me how you really met my grandson. And please spare me the sanitized version you've no doubt prepared for the society columns." Vivian hesitated, panic fluttering in her chest. The dossier hadn't prepared her for direct interrogation from Eleanor. "The truth, dear. I've spent 89 years developing an excellent radar for nonsense." Making a split-second decision, Vivian opted for a version closer to reality. "I ran in front of his car on Fifth Avenue. Coffee went everywhere. He was furious. I was late for work. We argued in the middle of the street." To her surprise, Eleanor burst out laughing. "Now that I believe. And what did you think of him in that moment of authentic introduction?" "That he was arrogant, entitled, and probably hadn't heard the word no in at least a decade." Eleanor's eyes sparkled with approval. "And yet here you are. He's more complicated than I initially thought. All the Blackwood men are. His grandfather was the same way. Prickly exterior hiding a depth most people never bothered to discover." Eleanor took Vivian's hand. "Maxwell doesn't let people in easily. Not since his parents died." "He mentioned that," Vivian said softly. "It must have been terrible for him, and for you." Something softened in Eleanor's face. "It was. He went from a talkative, exuberant child to a solemn little man overnight, determined to control everything because the most important thing had been taken from him without warning." Vivian felt a strange ache in her chest. "That explains a lot." "It explains, but it doesn't excuse. I've watched him build walls so high even I can barely see over them anymore." Eleanor's gaze was direct. "Which is why I'm curious about what exactly he sees in you, Ms. Hayes." Vivian swallowed hard. "Perhaps the same thing I see in him." "And what might that be?" Meeting the older woman's eyes, Vivian answered with unexpected honesty. "Someone fighting to reconcile who they are with who they think they need to be." Eleanor studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Well done, my dear. Perfect. Answer." Before Vivian could respond, Maxwell returned with 3 champagne flutes. "I see you've survived the Inquisition," he said lightly, though his eyes searched Vivian's face. "Your grandmother was just sharing some stories about you as a child," Vivian improvised. "Something about a frog in the bathtub of the Hamptons house?" Maxwell's expression was priceless, a mixture of horror and confusion. Eleanor smoothly picked up the fabricated thread. "He was determined to create a proper habitat, complete with lily pads from my prize garden," she elaborated. "The housekeeper nearly had a heart attack." Maxwell recovered quickly. "I was an enterprising child. You were a menace," Eleanor corrected fondly. "Now I must circulate. The Harrington Foundation expects me to charm at least $1 million out of this crowd tonight." She squeezed Vivian's hand. "Save me a dance, Maxwell. And bring this delightful creature to Sunday brunch at the townhouse." As Eleanor glided away, Maxwell turned to Vivian with genuine curiosity. "What really happened? You look like you've either passed a crucial test or committed a felony." "Both, possibly," Vivian replied. "Your grandmother asked for the truth about how we met." Maxwell stiffened. "And you told her a version of it. The coffee, the argument, but not the arrangement." Vivian sipped her champagne. She seemed to approve, oddly enough. He relaxed marginally. "Grandmother appreciates authenticity even when it's uncomfortable." His eyes scanned the room. "We should mingle. Several board members are watching us with unseemly interest." The next few hours passed in a blur of introductions and carefully calibrated interactions. Maxwell guided her through the social labyrinth with surprising attentiveness, always keeping her involved in conversations, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. To anyone watching, they appeared to be a couple deeply attuned to each other's needs, she softening his sharp edges, he elevating her with his confidence. It was all performance, Vivian reminded herself. Yet she couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach when he pulled her onto the dance floor as a string quartet began playing Gershwin's The Man I Love. "I didn't know billionaires could dance," she murmured as he led her flawlessly through the steps. "British boarding school," he explained. "Ballroom dancing was required. Supposedly built character." "Did it?" "It taught me that following the prescribed steps doesn't always prepare you for the improvisation required outside the ballroom." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "You're a natural, though." Community center classes in high school. My mom insisted. The memory brought an unexpected pang. She said everyone should know how to dance, regardless of circumstances. Something in her tone caught his attention. Your mother sounds wise. She was, Vivian said quietly. Cancer 3 years ago. Maxwell missed a step, the first imperfection in his otherwise flawless performance. I didn't know. It wasn't in the dossier, she said, attempting lightness, not relevant to our arrangement. He studied her face. I disagree. For a moment, they simply moved together, the practiced steps creating an illusion of harmony between two people from entirely different worlds. This charade, Maxwell said suddenly, his voice low. It's convincing because there's truth woven through it. The best deceptions always contain elements of authenticity. Is that a business strategy? Or a personal philosophy? His smile held unexpected melancholy. Both, perhaps. He guided her into a turn, their bodies moving closer together than strictly necessary. You understand loss. It changes how you move through the world. It does, she agreed, surprised by his insight. But differently for each person. How did it change you? The question caught her off guard, intimate in a way their physical proximity wasn't. It made me impatient with pretense. Life's too short for anything but the truth. She met his gaze. How did it change you? For several beats, Maxwell said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then, with clinical precision, he answered, It taught me that attachment is a vulnerability best avoided. Emotional distance is the most efficient protection against pain. The honesty was startling, a crack in his perfect facade. Before Vivian could respond, the music ended. Maxwell stepped back, the moment broken. Congratulations, he said, his business mask firmly back in place. You've survived your first high society event. The board members are suitably impressed. My grandmother is enchanted, and tomorrow's society pages will undoubtedly declare us Manhattan's new power couple. But as they moved through the rest of the evening, Vivian found herself watching Maxwell with new eyes. Behind his practiced charm and calculated efficiency, she glimpsed something she hadn't expected. A lonely boy who had learned to mistake isolation for strength. And for the first time since their arrangement began, she wondered if 6 weeks would be enough to untangle the complex web they were weaving, and whether either of them would emerge from it unchanged. 5 weeks had transformed Vivian's life into something unrecognizable. She'd attended galas and charity auctions, weekend retreats in the Hamptons, and Sunday brunches at Eleanor's townhouse. She'd mastered the art of small talk with senators and tech moguls, learned which fork to use for each course, and grown accustomed to having her every need anticipated by Maxwell's efficient staff. Most surprisingly, she'd grown accustomed to Maxwell himself. Now, sitting in his sleek home office reviewing contracts for his latest acquisition, the one that had sparked this entire charade, Vivian realized how comfortable their routine had become. The environmental impact statement is inadequate, she said, marking a section with a yellow highlighter. If you acquire this company with these practices in place, you're inheriting significant liability. Maxwell looked up from his laptop. I have a team of environmental lawyers who've cleared it. Your team missed this. Vivian pointed to a clause buried in the appendix. Their waste disposal protocols violate 3 EPA regulations that were updated last quarter. When these violations come to light, and they will, the fines alone would erase your projected first-year profits. Maxwell studied the passage, then reached for his phone. Jessica, get Roberts on the line. Tell him I need a complete reassessment of the Westfield environmental compliance, with particular attention to the updated EPA regulations. He hung up and gave Vivian an appreciative nod. Good catch. Just doing my part to protect the Blackwood Empire? She replied with a hint of irony. Is that what we're calling it now? His lips curved in what Vivian had come to recognize as a genuine smile, rare in the beginning, increasingly frequent as the weeks passed. And here I thought you were sharpening your skills to eventually bring that empire to its knees. Girl can do both. Maxwell leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that had once made her uncomfortable, but now felt familiar. You'd be an asset to any legal team. When this is over, I'd be happy to connect you with some firms that align with your ethical priorities. When this is over. The words hung between them, a reminder of what they both seemed determined to forget. That their relationship had an expiration date. In just 1 week, their arrangement would conclude. The contract would be fulfilled. Maxwell would acquire his company with Eleanor's blessing, and Vivian would return to her old life, albeit debt-free. The thought left a hollow feeling in her chest. I should finish packing, she said abruptly, rising from the desk. Eleanor's birthday weekend at the Hamptons estate starts tomorrow. Vivian. Maxwell's voice stopped her at the door. My grandmother has requested that we arrive early, just the two of us, tonight. Why? She didn't say. But with Eleanor, it's best not to question. Vivian nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of nervousness. In the weeks since their first meeting, she'd grown genuinely fond of Eleanor. The thought of maintaining their deception directly, without the buffer of social events and other guests, felt increasingly wrong. I'll be ready by 6, she said. The drive to the Hamptons was uncharacteristically quiet. Maxwell worked on his tablet while Vivian watched the landscape change from urban to rural, the sprawling estates growing more impressive as they neared the coast. After nearly an hour of silence, Maxwell set his work aside. You're unusually quiet tonight. Just thinking about the future, Vivian admitted. After? He turned to face her fully. Having second thoughts about returning to your previous life? Not exactly, but it will be an adjustment. She chose her words carefully. These past weeks have been educational. Is that all they've been? The question hung between them, laden with implications neither seemed ready to address. What happens after our breakup? Vivian asked instead. Do you find another woman to convince Eleanor of your reformed character? Or is one fake relationship enough to secure your business objectives? Something hardened in Maxwell's expression. Our arrangement has always been clear. Once the acquisition is complete, we part ways amicably. You return to your life financially unburdened. I return to mine. Right back to being Manhattan's most heartless bachelor. I never claimed this experience would change me, Vivian. But it had, she thought. In subtle ways neither of them acknowledged aloud. The way he now asked about her day before diving into business. How he'd started joining her for breakfast, rather than having his assistant deliver agenda items over. Coffee. The night he'd found her reading in the library at 3 a.m. during a bout of insomnia, and sat with her for hours, discussing everything from climate policy to childhood memories. Small changes that amounted to... what, exactly? The car turned through ornate iron gates and proceeded down a tree-lined drive to the Blackwood estate, a sprawling Georgian mansion overlooking the Atlantic. Unlike the sleek modernity of Maxwell's penthouse, the family home embraced traditional elegance with ivy-covered walls and perfectly manicured gardens. Eleanor greeted them on the front steps, elegant as always in tailored slacks and a cashmere sweater. There you are. I was beginning to think you'd decided to skip the birthday festivities entirely. And risk your disappointment? Never. Maxwell kissed her cheek. Happy birthday, grandmother. It's not my birthday until Sunday. She corrected. But thank you for indulging my request for an early arrival. She linked her arm through Vivian's. I've asked the staff to serve dinner on the terrace. The sunset over the water is particularly beautiful tonight. Dinner was an intimate affair, just the three of them beneath a canopy of fairy lights. Eleanor regaled Vivian with stories of Maxwell's childhood, his science experiments gone awry, his determination to learn sailing one summer, his brief but passionate attempt to become a rock musician at 14. He was quite good on the guitar, Eleanor insisted, but apparently investment banking offered more appropriate outlets for teenage rebellion in our family. I still play occasionally, Maxwell admitted, surprising Vivian. The acoustics in The penthouse library are quite good. You never mentioned that, Vivian said. There are many things about me you don't know, he replied, his eyes holding hers for a moment too long. After dinner, Eleanor excused herself, claiming fatigue. You two enjoy the evening. Perhaps a walk on the beach, the moon is nearly full. Left alone, Maxwell and Vivian found themselves following Eleanor's suggestion, removing their shoes to walk along the private stretch of shoreline. The rhythmic crash of waves filled the silence between them. Your grandmother is remarkable, Vivian finally said. You're fortunate to have her. I am. Maxwell's voice softened, though I'm not always the grandson she deserves. She knows you love her. Does she? He stopped, looking out at the moonlit water. I've spent most of my adult life focused on building the business, expanding what she and my grandfather created. I thought that was how I showed my appreciation. And now? Now I'm beginning to understand there might be more effective ways to honor their legacy. He turned to her. You've changed her, you know. She's more animated these past weeks than I've seen her in years. I haven't done anything special. You've been authentic, given her something real in a world of performance and calculation. Maxwell's expression was unreadable in the moonlight. You've been good for her, for both of us. The admission hung between them like a tangible thing. Vivian felt her heart quicken. Maxwell, we should head back. He interrupted. Whatever moment had been building suddenly broken. It's getting cold. The next morning, Vivian found Eleanor in the garden, supervising arrangements for the weekend's festivities. Ah, Vivian, just the person I wanted to see. Eleanor dismissed the event planner with a wave. Walk with me, dear. They strolled through the rose garden, Eleanor occasionally stopping to deadhead a bloom or adjust a support. I want to thank you, the older woman said finally. For what? For bringing my grandson back to me. Eleanor's keen eyes studied Vivian's face. Maxwell has always been brilliant at business but remarkably obtuse about matters of the heart. It's been refreshing to see him with someone who challenges that particular blindness. Vivian felt her chest tighten with guilt. Mrs. Blackwood, Eleanor, please. Eleanor, I think you might have misunderstood. Your arrangement? Eleanor finished, her expression knowing. I may be old, my dear, but I'm not a fool. 6 weeks is a rather specific timeline for a romance, don't you think? Particularly one that conveniently aligns with my birthday and the Westfield acquisition. Vivian stopped, stunned. You knew? All along? Not immediately. But I've watched Maxwell negotiate his way through life for decades. I recognize his handiwork. She patted Vivian's hand. Don't look so stricken, I'm not angry. I've been lying to you. Have you? About your background, your aspirations, your opinions on climate policy and corporate responsibility? Eleanor shook her head. No, I think those have been refreshingly honest. The nature of your relationship with Maxwell may have begun as a charade, but what's developed between you is quite real. We have a contract, Vivian said weakly. Contracts can be renegotiated. Eleanor smiled. That's business lesson number 1. It's not that simple. Love rarely is. Eleanor reached out to touch a particularly vibrant rose. Do you know why I insisted on approving Maxwell's acquisition? It wasn't about the business strategy. The boy could run circles around me in that department by the time he was 25. Then why? Because I watched him turn himself into a machine after his parents died, precise, efficient, and utterly isolated. I wanted him to prove he still had the capacity to connect with another human being before I signed off on expanding his empire. Eleanor's eyes were suddenly fierce. A person who can't form meaningful bonds shouldn't hold that much power over others' lives. Vivian was speechless, the implications of Eleanor's words sinking in. The arrangement may have begun as his idea, Eleanor continued, but something unexpected has happened, hasn't it? For both of you. Before Vivian could respond, her phone chimed with a message from Maxwell, asking her to meet him in his grandfather's study. She found him pacing before floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, his usual composure noticeably absent. "Close the door," he said without preamble. Vivian complied, apprehension building. "What's wrong?" "Our contract." He gestured to his laptop. "I've been reviewing it in preparation for next week's conclusion, and I find the terms suddenly unsatisfactory." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so uncharacteristic it alarmed her. "I'd like to propose an amendment." "What kind of amendment?" "An extension." Vivian's heart skipped. "For how long?" Maxwell met her gaze directly. "Indefinitely." The word hung in the air between them. Vivian struggled to understand. "You want to continue our arrangement? The public appearances, the pretense?" "No." He stepped closer. "I want to renegotiate. New terms, no pretense." "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." His voice softened. "You've spent 6 weeks analyzing every contract detail, questioning every clause. You're too intelligent not to see what's happening here." "Say it," she demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. "No business terminology, no euphemisms, just say what you mean." Maxwell took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you. Not as part of our arrangement, not to please my grandmother or secure a business deal. Simply because you've dismantled every defense I've constructed over the past 20 years without even trying." Vivian stared at him, her heart pounding. That wasn't part of the contract. Hence the need for renegotiation. A hint of his old confidence returned. "I'm prepared to offer very favorable terms." Despite everything, Vivian laughed. "You're impossible. Even now you're approaching this like a business deal." "Old habits." His smile was self-deprecating. "But I'm willing to learn new ones. If you're willing to teach me. And if I'm not? If I walk away next week as planned? Then I honor our original agreement. Your loans are paid. Your future is secured. We part as friends, I hope." His expression grew serious. "But I'd be remiss as a businessman if I didn't explore all possible avenues before accepting such a significant loss." "Is that what I'd be? A loss?" Maxwell closed the distance between them, his hands coming to rest lightly on her shoulders. "You would be the one calculation I got catastrophically wrong. The variable I failed to account for. The risk I didn't properly assess." "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me," Vivian said dryly, though her pulse raced at his proximity. "I told you I need to learn new habits." She studied his face, the face she'd come to know so well over these weeks. The sharp intelligence in his eyes, the slight asymmetry of his smile, the barely perceptible scar at his temple from a childhood sailing accident. "I have terms of my own," she said finally. His eyebrows rose. "I'm listening." "I finished law school. On my own merit, not with Blackwood connections." "Agreed." "I pursue my career goals, including potentially suing corporations like yours when they violate environmental regulations." A smile tugged at his lips. "Potential conflict of interest but negotiable. And most importantly," Vivian continued, "no more walls, no more emotional efficiency, no more treating feelings like inconvenient disruptions to your business plan. That's a significant restructuring of my operational model." His voice was light, but his eyes were serious. "Deal breaker," she said firmly. Maxwell considered her for a long moment. "Counter-proposal. I commit to gradual but consistent progress on emotional availability, with quarterly reviews and measurable benchmarks." Vivian laughed despite herself. "You're incorrigible." "I prefer adaptable." His hands moved from her shoulders to frame her face. "Final offer, Ms. Hayes. I promise to try every day to be worthy of whatever this is between us. No contracts, no arrangements, just us, finding our way together." "That," Vivian said softly, "sounds like terms I could accept." When he kissed her, there was no audience to perform for, no deception to maintain. Just the simple, startling truth of two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances. Later that evening, as guests began arriving for the weekend celebration, Eleanor found them on the terrace, hands intertwined as they watched the sunset. "I see negotiations concluded successfully," she observed with a knowing smile. Maxwell looked at his grandmother suspiciously. "You orchestrated this entire situation, didn't you? The acquisition approval, the relationship requirement, it was all a setup." "Don't be ridiculous, darling. I merely created favorable conditions and waited for you to make the logical decision." Eleanor patted his cheek affectionately. "It's what any good businesswoman would do." As Eleanor moved away to greet her guests, Maxwell shook his head in amazement. "I've been outmaneuvered by my own grandmother." "She's quite the strategist," Vivian agreed. "Must run in the family." "Along with an appreciation for women who aren't afraid to challenge us." He squeezed her hand. "I should warn you, a relationship with the Blackwood isn't always easy." Vivian smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought them to this moment, from a coffee-splattered Bentley on Fifth Avenue to a heart opened despite its owner's best defenses. "The best deals," she replied, echoing his words from weeks ago, "always involve a certain amount of risk." As Maxwell led her toward the gathering, Vivian reflected that some arrangements, even those that begin as calculated business transactions, have a way of transforming into something far more valuable than either party could have predicted. Something that, unlike the fortunes and empires built by the Blackwood family over generations, couldn't be measured, controlled, or contained in neat contractual clauses, something for which, fortunately, there was no price. Epilogue. 1 year later, Vivian stood in the doorway of Maxwell's, now their penthouse library, watching as he played guitar for Eleanor, who applauded enthusiastically at the conclusion of the impromptu concert. "Bravo! You've still got it, my boy." "Don't encourage him," Vivian said, entering with a tray of tea. "Last week he was serenading me at 3 in the morning because inspiration struck." "The creative process can't be scheduled," Maxwell defended, setting aside the guitar to help with the tea service, a small gesture that would have been unthinkable in the Maxwell she'd first met. "How goes the environmental initiative?" Eleanor asked as Vivian poured. "Surprisingly well. We've got 10 major corporations signed on to the enhanced compliance standards." Vivian glanced at Maxwell. "Including Blackwood Enterprises, which has somehow become the model of corporate environmental responsibility." "Amazing what proper motivation can accomplish," Maxwell remarked, his eyes warm as they met hers. The Blackwood Environmental Accountability Project had been their compromise, a way for Vivian to pursue her passion for environmental law while working with corporations rather than against them. The initiative, funded by the Blackwood Foundation but operated independently, was already making waves in the business community. "And the wedding plans?" Eleanor inquired innocently. "Still under negotiation," Maxwell replied with a smile. "Vivian refuses to let me hire an event planner." "Because you'd turn it into the corporate event of the century," Vivian countered. "I want something authentic." "Compromise is the foundation of any successful partnership," Eleanor observed, "both business and personal." As their conversation continued, Vivian marveled at how thoroughly her life had transformed since that fateful morning on Fifth Avenue. She'd completed law school, launched a groundbreaking environmental initiative, and fallen in love with a man who had once been the embodiment of everything she opposed. Maxwell, too, had changed. The sharp edges remained. She wouldn't want him any other way, but they no longer cut quite so deeply. He'd learned to balance efficiency with emotion, strategy with spontaneity. He still approached life with a businessman's precision, but his calculations now included variables like joy, connection, and love. Some would call it a fairy tale, the billionaire and the barista, finding unexpected love despite their differences. But Vivian knew better. What they'd built wasn't a fantasy, but something far more valuable. A partnership forged through honesty, strengthened by challenge and sustained by the conscious choice, made each day to see and accept each other exactly as they were. Not a fiction created for public consumption, but a private truth they continued to discover together, with no expiration date and no final payment due. The best deal either of them had ever made.